I was standing at my ex-husband's casket when his sister Lisa pointed at me and screamed those 7 words that changed everything. She killed him. Arrest her right now. The funeral home went dead silent. 200 people turned to stare at me like I was a murderer who'd just walked into their midst. My legs felt like water. My 8-year-old son, Colton, pressed himself against my side, his small body trembling. This was supposed to be our goodbye to his father, and instead it was turning into my public execution. But what happened next when my 8-year-old son climbed onto that casket would send half the funeral guests running to call 911. My name is Veronica, and 3 hours ago I was just a divorced mom trying to help my son say goodbye to his father. Garrett had been my husband for 10 years before our divorce 2 years ago. We weren't friends exactly, but we'd found our rhythm as co-parents. He took Colton every other weekend, never missed a baseball game, and we could have a civil conversation about school pickups without it turning into a war. Lisa, though. Garrett's sister had hated me from day one. She blamed me for her brother's affair, somehow twisting logic until his cheating became my fault. "If you'd been a better wife," she'd said at our divorce proceedings, "he wouldn't have needed to find comfort elsewhere." The fact that he'd been sleeping with his 23-year-old personal trainer while I was home with our sick child apparently didn't factor into her equation. Now here she stood, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at me like a weapon, her voice rising to a shriek that echoed off the funeral home walls. She threatened him. She tortured him with custody battles. The stress gave him a heart attack, and she knew it would. Murderer. Child abuser. She shouldn't be allowed near any child, especially Garrett's son. The mourners were backing away from me. I heard whispers rippling through the crowd. Someone said, "Call the police." Another voice muttered, "I always thought she was vindictive." My former mother-in-law, Helen, was frozen in the front row, her face white as paper. Garrett's brother, Paul, stood up like he might intervene, but then sat back down, unsure what to do. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to grab Colton and get out of there. But my son, my quiet, thoughtful 8-year-old, who still wore Superman pajamas and believed in justice, he looked up at me with those huge brown eyes that were exactly like his father's and said something that stopped my heart. "Mommy, why is Aunt Lisa lying about what happened to Daddy?" That's when I realized my son knew something. Something that would turn this funeral into a crime scene before the day was over. 3 days before this nightmare at the funeral home, I was sitting in my kitchen staring at my phone like it might explode. Helen's name flashed on the screen, and something in my gut told me this wasn't about Colton's upcoming birthday party or switching weekends. When you've been part of a family for 12 years, even after divorce, you learn to feel the tremors before the earthquake hits. "Veronica, honey, I need you to sit down." Helen's voice was wrong, too careful, too soft. I stayed standing, gripping the counter. "Garrett had a heart attack at work this morning. The paramedics tried everything. He didn't make it." The words hit me in waves. Heart attack, tried everything, didn't make it. My ex-husband, the man who ran 5 miles every morning and posted protein shake recipes on Instagram, was dead at 36. The same man who texted me yesterday about Colton's science project, complaining that the volcano instructions were more complicated than his MBA coursework. "That's not possible," I heard myself say. He sent me a video of him at the gym on Sunday. He was bench pressing 200 pounds. Helen's sob broke through my denial. "The funeral is Thursday at Morrison's funeral home. Please bring Colton. Whatever happened between you and Garrett, you were family. You're still family." After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to tell my son his father was never coming back. There's no chapter in the parenting books for this. No Pinterest board for how to explain death to your 8-year-old when you're still processing it yourself. Colton was in his room building another one of his elaborate LEGO cities. He'd inherited Garrett's engineering brain, creating structures that defied gravity and logic. I knocked on his doorframe, and he looked up with that huge smile that made him look exactly like his father had in our wedding photos. "Hey, buddy, can we talk for a minute?" He must have seen something in my face because the smile faded. "Is Dad okay?" He didn't call last night like he promised. I sat on his dinosaur comforter, the one Garrett had insisted on buying even though I said Colton was getting too old for cartoons. Baby, I need to tell you something really hard. Daddy got very sick at work today. His heart stopped working. I pulled him onto my lap, feeling his whole body go rigid. The doctors tried to help him, but they couldn't fix it. Daddy died this morning. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Then Colton asked the question that shattered me. Did it hurt when his heart stopped? No, sweetheart, I lied, holding him tighter. It was like falling asleep. Very quick. He wasn't scared, but he was supposed to teach me to ride without training wheels this weekend, Colton whispered into my shoulder. He promised we'd go to the park with the big hill. That night, Colton slept in my bed, clutching the Build-A-Bear Garrett had made with him last year. It wore a tiny Lakers jersey and smelled like Garrett's cologne, because Colton had sprayed it during their last visit. I didn't sleep at all, just watched my son's chest rise and fall, thinking about all the father-son moments that would never happen now. The next 2 days blurred together. I helped Helen with funeral arrangements while juggling Colton's questions. Will Dad be cold in the ground? Can he still see me from heaven? Should I bring my report card to show him? Each question was a fresh wound, but I answered them all with as much truth as an 8-year-old could handle. Paul called to warn me that Lisa was taking it hard and saying some things she didn't mean. He suggested maybe I should skip the funeral, let him bring Colton instead. But I'd been running from Lisa's venom for 2 years. I wasn't going to let her steal my son's chance to say goodbye to his father. The morning of the funeral, Colton stood in front of his closet for 15 minutes before pulling out the Superman tie Garrett had given him last Christmas. Dad said superheroes are brave even when they're scared, he explained, struggling with the clip. I want to be brave for him. I fixed his tie and smoothed down the cowlick that never stayed flat, the same one Garrett had fought with every morning. You're already the bravest person I know, baby. As we drove to Morrison's funeral home, Colton was quiet in the back seat. Then, just as we pulled into the parking lot, he said something that made my blood run cold. Mom, is Aunt Lisa going to be there? I need to tell someone about the coffee. The moment we walked into Morrison's funeral home, I felt the atmosphere shift like air before a thunderstorm. The lobby was packed with Garrett's colleagues, golf buddies, and extended family, but Lisa stood at the entrance, like she'd been waiting for me specifically. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that made her face look sharp as a blade. You have some nerve showing up here, she hissed, stepping directly into our path. Her perfume was overwhelming, the same expensive brand she'd worn to every family gathering where she'd made passive-aggressive comments about my cooking, my parenting, my very existence. I kept my voice steady and low, aware of Colton's hand tightening in mine. Helen invited us. Colton deserves to say goodbye to his father. Deserves? Lisa's laugh was bitter and loud enough to draw stares. That boy deserves better than a mother who drove his father to an early grave. Aunt Lisa, Colton said quietly, please don't fight with Mommy. Dad wouldn't like it. For a second, Lisa's face softened as she looked at my son. Then her eyes hardened again. Your daddy isn't here to like or dislike anything anymore, sweetie. Thanks to her. Paul appeared at Lisa's elbow, steering her away with whispered urgences about greeting other guests. He threw me an apologetic look over his shoulder. Helen hugged us both when we reached our seats, whispering, I'm so glad you came into my hair. But I could feel Lisa's eyes burning into my back from across the room. The service started peacefully enough. The funeral. Director spoke about celebrating a life cut short. Garrett's business partner, Marcus, told a funny story about their first failed startup and how Garrett had convinced him to try again. Paul's eulogy was beautiful, talking about growing up with Garrett, their fishing trips, the way Garrett could fix anything from a broken heart to a broken transmission. Then Lisa took the podium. She started normally, talking about her baby brother, how she'd protected him from bullies in elementary school. But then her tone shifted, her knuckles white as she gripped the edges of the podium. My brother was murdered, she announced, her voice cutting through the chapel like a scalpel. The crowd gasped collectively. Someone dropped a hymnal. Helen stood up halfway from her seat, then sank back down. Not with a weapon that leaves evidence, Lisa continued, her voice rising with each word, but with stress, with constant harassment, with a vindictive ex-wife who made his life a living hell. Veronica killed him as surely as if she'd put a gun to his head. She pointed directly at me, and 200 heads swiveled to stare. I felt my face burn, but I kept my eyes forward, my arm around Colton, who had started to tremble. She threatened him constantly. Said she'd take Colton away forever, move across the country where Garrett would never see him again. She filed motion after motion in court, draining his bank accounts with legal fees. The stress gave him that heart attack. She knew he had high blood pressure, knew the family history of heart disease, and she pushed and pushed until his heart literally couldn't take it anymore. "Lisa, please, not here, not in front of the child," Helen pleaded from the front row, but Lisa was beyond stopping. And now she's here playing the grieving ex-wife? She's probably already calculating his life insurance payout, planning how to spend the money meant for Colton's future. She destroyed my brother, and mark my words, she'll destroy that innocent boy too. She shouldn't be allowed near any child, especially Garrett's son. She's toxic, poisonous, a cancer that spreads to everyone she touches. The whispers started immediately. I heard fragments. Always thought she was cold? Poor Garrett. That explains the divorce. Should someone call child services? A woman I didn't recognize actually moved her children away from where we were sitting, as if my proximity might contaminate them. Colton's small voice cut through my spiral of humiliation. "Mommy, why is Aunt Lisa lying about you?" "You never said those things. You told Dad you wanted me to have two parents who loved me." But Lisa wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone, waving it like evidence in a trial. "I have text messages." Garrett telling me how scared he was, how she manipulated him, how she used their son as a weapon. She's a monster hiding behind a mother's mask. The funeral director approached the podium, clearly trying to regain control. But Lisa pushed him away. "Everyone needs to know the truth. She killed my brother with calculated cruelty, and she's here to dance on his grave." That's when people started picking sides. Some nodded along with Lisa's accusations. Others looked uncomfortable. A few headed for the exits. The beautiful funeral service had transformed into a public trial, and I was the defendant without a chance to speak. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, but my mind suddenly crystal clear. This wasn't the place for a confrontation, and Colton didn't need to witness any more of his aunt's venomous performance. I reached for my purse, keeping my movements calm and deliberate, trying not to look like I was fleeing even though every cell in my body screamed to run. "Come on, baby," I whispered to Colton. "We should go." But as I gathered our things, Colton's hand slipped out of mine. He stood perfectly still for a moment, his small chest rising and falling with deep breaths, that Superman tie catching the light from the stained glass windows. "No, Mommy." His voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Dad wouldn't run away." He told me that Waynes never run from bullies. Before I could stop him, before anyone could react, my 8-year-old son walked straight down the center aisle toward his father's casket. His dress shoes clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing in the suddenly silent chapel. The funeral director moved to intervene, reaching out to guide him back to his seat, but Colton sidestepped him with surprising agility. In one fluid motion that seemed impossible for a child his size, Colton climbed onto the platform beside his father's casket. He stood there, all 4 feet of him, facing the crowd of 200 stunned adults. The afternoon light streaming through the windows created a halo effect around his small frame. "Aunt Lisa," Colton said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "you're telling lies about my mommy, and Dad taught me that lying is wrong, especially in church." Lisa's face went from pale to crimson in seconds. "Sweetie, you don't understand adult problems. Come down from there right now. I understand everything." Colton's voice didn't waver. "I understand that Daddy was sick. I understand that you visited him a lot, and I understand what I saw you doing." The room seemed to hold its breath collectively. Helen grabbed Paul's arm. Several people pulled out their phones, whether to record or call for help. I couldn't tell. "What are you talking about, child?" Lisa's voice had gone sharp, dangerous. "You're confused. You're grieving. Someone get him down from there." But Colton stood his ground, his small hands balled into fists at his sides. "I'm not confused." "I saw you, Aunt Lisa, every morning when you came to Daddy's house. You said you were helping him feel better, but he got sicker and sicker." "Of course I was helping him. I brought him vitamins, supplements for his running." Lisa's voice cracked slightly. Your mother has poisoned your mind against me. Mommy doesn't know, Colton said simply. I never told her. I never told anyone. But I watched you through the stairs railings. Every morning for the whole last month, you made Daddy's special coffee. You put white powder in it from a little bottle you kept in your purse. The gasp that went through the crowd was like wind through trees. Someone in the back said, "Oh my God." Helen stood up fully now, her hand over her mouth. Lisa laughed, but it sounded forced, hollow. Protein powder. I was putting protein powder in his coffee. This is ridiculous. He's a child making up stories. Then why did you tell Daddy not to tell anyone? Colton's question hung in the air like an accusation. Why did you say it had to be our secret? And why did you throw the bottles away in the dumpster behind the grocery store instead of in Daddy's trash can? Paul stepped forward now, his face ashen. Lisa, what is he talking about? He's lying, Lisa shrieked, but her voice had gone too high, too desperate. He's been coached. Veronica put him up to this. Colton reached into his pocket and pulled out his tablet, the one Garrett had given him for his birthday. Dad taught me to document important things. He said evidence is better than arguments. He held the tablet up. I have videos, Aunt Lisa. 17 videos of you putting powder in Daddy's coffee. You said it would help with the custody case. You said if Daddy got sick, the judge would see that Mommy was stressing him out and she couldn't take me away. The funeral home erupted into chaos. People were shouting, some calling 911, others trying to get closer to hear better. Lisa lunged toward the platform, screaming, "Give me that tablet!" But Paul and 2 other men held her back. You said vitamins, Colton continued, his voice cutting through the noise. But vitamins don't make people throw up. Daddy threw up every morning after his coffee. He was so tired he could barely drive me to school. His hands shook when he tried to help me with homework. I stood frozen in place, my mind racing to process what my son was revealing. All those mornings when Garrett had called to say he was too sick for his custody days. The weight loss I'd attributed to stress, the gray pallor he'd developed in the last month that I'd thought was from working too much. I wanted to tell someone. Colton's voice broke for the first time, tears streaming down his face. But you said if I told anyone, Mommy would take me away forever and I'd never see Daddy again. You said you were protecting our family. The funeral home erupted like a volcano. Helen screamed a sound I'd never heard from her before, primal and wounded. Paul grabbed Lisa's arm as she tried to lunge toward Colton again, shouting, "That tablet is mine!" He stole it from my house. 3 different people were on their phones with 911, talking over each other, but my son, my brave 8-year-old boy, kept talking from his position beside his father's casket. I took a video every morning after you left, Colton said, swiping through his tablet. Dad was at work and you thought I was playing video games upstairs. But I watched you, and I recorded you. The funeral director had given up trying to restore order and was instead clearing a path for what we all knew was coming. Sure enough, within 5 minutes, 2 police officers entered the chapel, followed quickly by 2 more. The lead officer, a woman with graying hair and kind eyes, approached the platform slowly. "Son, I'm Officer Rodriguez. Can you come down and talk to me?" Colton looked at me and I nodded, moving forward to help him down. As I lifted him from the platform, he whispered in my ear, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I should have told someone sooner." "You did perfect, baby," I whispered back, holding him tight. Officer Rodriguez took the tablet gently from Colton's hands. "We're going to need to see what's on here." She looked at Lisa, who had gone from red to ghost white. "Ma'am, I need you to stay right where you are." "This is insane," Lisa shouted, but her voice was breaking apart. "I was helping my brother. He had a potassium deficiency from all his running. His doctor said he needed supplements." "Then you'll have the prescription," Officer Rodriguez said calmly, "and the doctor's name. I don't need to tell you anything. That child is traumatized. He's making things up because his mother coached him." Lisa pointed at me again, but her hand was shaking violently. "She's the one who should be arrested. She killed Garrett with stress." Paul stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Lisa, just tell them the truth. What did you give him?" "Potassium supplement," Lisa insisted. Then, in the next breath, "protein powder." Then, "vitamins for his heart." Each version contradicted the last, her story crumbling in real time. Officer Rodriguez pulled on latex gloves and took an evidence bag from her partner. "We're going to need to take that tablet as evidence. And ma'am," she looked at Lisa, "we need you to come with us for questioning." "I want a lawyer," Lisa screamed. "This is harassment. That boy is lying." But Colton wasn't done. He looked directly at his aunt, tears streaming down his face, but his voice steady. "You told Daddy you were scared of losing us. You said Mommy was going to move to California and take me away. You said the powder would just make him a little sick so the judge would think Mommy was hurting him. But Daddy got sicker and sicker. He couldn't even push me on the swings anymore." Detective Morrison arrived then, a tall man with a notebook already out. He'd been the detective on Garrett's case, standard procedure for a sudden death. "We pulled the preliminary autopsy results on the way here," he announced to the room. "Mr. Wayne had potassium chloride levels 3 times the lethal limit in his system. We'd attributed it to a heart condition, but this changes everything." Lisa's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing hysterically. "I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to make him a little sick. The website said small amounts would cause fatigue and nausea. I was protecting him from her." She pointed at me one more time, but the accusation had lost all its power. "What website?" Detective Morrison asked, pen ready. "The one about custody battles and protecting fathers' rights. They said sometimes you have to take extreme measures to protect the children from toxic mothers. I was saving Colton." Paul's voice was ice. "You killed our brother because of something you read on the internet." "I measured it carefully," Lisa wailed. "A 1/4 teaspoon each day. The website said that would be enough to show symptoms but not cause permanent damage. But then he started getting worse, so I increased it to help speed things up before the custody hearing next month." The confession hung in the air like poison. Helen fainted, requiring 2 EMTs who'd just arrived. The funeral guests were either fleeing or pressing closer, phones out, recording everything. Someone from Garrett's office was crying in the back row. Officer Rodriguez read Lisa her rights while her partner cuffed her. As they led her toward the door, Lisa looked back at me with pure hatred. "This is your fault. If you hadn't divorced him, if you hadn't tried to take Colton, none of this would have happened. You killed him. You." But her words fell flat. Everyone had heard the truth from her own mouth. She'd poisoned her brother, my son's father, because of her twisted need to control a situation that didn't need controlling. The funeral had to be postponed indefinitely. Morrison's funeral home became a crime scene, with yellow tape blocking the chapel entrance and forensic teams collecting evidence. Helen was kept overnight at the hospital for observation after her collapse, and Paul stayed with her, both of them trying to process how Lisa, their sister and daughter, had murdered Garrett while claiming to protect him. That night, I sat with Colton in his bedroom as he finally let himself break down completely. The Superman tie lay crumpled on his nightstand, and he sobbed into my chest with the force of all the fear and guilt he'd been carrying alone. "I knew something was wrong, Mommy," he cried, his small body shaking. Every morning after Aunt Lisa left, Daddy would run to the bathroom. He told me he had the flu, but the flu doesn't last a whole month. I should have told someone. Maybe if I'd said something sooner, Daddy would still be alive. I held him tighter, my own tears falling into his hair. "Listen to me, baby. This is not your fault. Not even a little bit. Aunt Lisa is an adult who made terrible choices. She manipulated you, scared you, and used your love for your daddy against you. You were brave enough to speak up when it mattered most. You saved other people from being hurt. Do you think Daddy knows I tried to help?" His voice was so small, muffled against my shoulder. "I know he does. And he's so proud of you. You stood up for truth when everyone else was believing lies." Detective Morrison called the next morning with updates. Lisa's computer history showed months of research into potassium chloride poisoning, dozens of visits to forums about protecting fathers from vindictive ex-wives, and orders from veterinary supply companies where she'd bought the potassium chloride claiming it was for her non-existent horses. She'd kept a journal documenting Garrett's symptoms, celebrating when he seemed weak, frustrated when he showed improvement. "Your son's testimony and videos were crucial," Morrison told me. "Without them, we might never have known this was murder." Lisa was careful, but she didn't count on an 8-year-old being that observant or brave enough to speak up. The trial was swift. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue for temporary insanity, claiming she'd been driven to desperate measures by her fear of losing her nephew. But the premeditation was too clear. The journal entries too calculated. She'd written things like, increased dose today, custody hearing in 3 weeks, need more dramatic symptoms. And he mentioned going to doctor, convinced him it's just stress from V's harassment. Lisa got 15 years for involuntary manslaughter, though the prosecutor had pushed for murder charges. During her sentencing, she still tried to blame me, claiming I'd driven her to it with my campaign to steal Colton. The judge shut her down, stating that her delusions about custody didn't justify poisoning her brother. Helen and Paul became permanent fixtures in our lives after everything settled. Helen moved closer to us, wanting to be near her grandson. She told me something that still echoes in my mind. Lisa was so terrified of losing Colton to you that she ended up taking Garrett from all of us. Fear makes people do terrible things when they let it control them. The real funeral, held 6 weeks later, was everything the first one should have been. Peaceful, loving, focused on celebrating Garrett's life, rather than assigning blame for his death. Colton read a letter he'd written to his father about being brave like Superman, about telling the truth even when scary people try to make you quiet. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel, but for the right reasons this time. Paul gave a new eulogy, talking about forgiveness and justice, about how Garrett would want us to move forward with love, not hate, even for Lisa, though that forgiveness would take time. My brother died because someone claimed to love him too much to let him go, Paul said. Let that be a lesson to all of us about the difference between love and control. Colton started therapy to process everything, and his therapist says he's remarkably resilient. He still wears that Superman tie on important days like school presentations, or when he visits his dad's grave. He says it reminds him that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear clip-on ties and tell the truth when everyone else is too scared to see it. My son saved me that day from a false accusation that could have destroyed my life. But more importantly, he found his voice and learned that speaking truth to power sometimes means standing on a platform beside your father's casket and refusing to let lies bury the truth with him. The last text Garrett ever sent me was about Colton's parent-teacher conference. He's got your courage and your moral compass. Kid's gonna change the world someday. He was right. Our 8-year-old son brought justice for his father in a way no adult could have, simply by being brave enough to document the truth and speak it when it mattered most. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and share it with others who need to hear about the power of truth and the courage of children. Leave a comment below about a time when someone unexpected stood up for what was right. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths.